All right, welcome back to another episode of Travel Ball Talk. I'm your host, Rich Prado, owner of Play in School. Today we're heading up to Chicago to catch up with Justin Stone of Elite Baseball Training. Justin's a guy I've been following for probably a decade, but listeners who are tuning in right now are going to hear our very first conversation. So if it doesn't sound like we're old pals, it's because we're not. We're just getting to know each other right now. So, Justin, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Well, if you follow me for that long, it just says that I'm getting old.
welcome to the club, man. Welcome to the club. I've been doing this Play in School thing now 15 years, and I've had multiple guests come on the show who are running their own travel ball organizations, who are running their own post-grad organizations that I filmed when they were in high school. And it's just, It's just like it in a way, it like warms my heart. In a way, it just makes me like, you know, where's the old folks home? Because I'm ready to check in. Anyway, Justin, tell the listeners where you're sitting right now and why you're sitting there.
Well, I am in the offices at Wrigley Field. We have a day game today at a 1:20 start, so I'll venture down from my office in the front office and go down and watch a little day baseball today.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Like I said before we hit record, I'm in the friendly confines of my my dining room where I make my office, and I can see ivy growing across my backyard. So it's pretty much the same, but a little different. A little different.
We're in a pretty good location because my facility, my house is actually right between Wrigley Field and my facility. So if I leave my house and go left about 4 blocks, I run into the Elite Baseball Training facility. If I go right out of my house about 6 blocks, I run into Wrigley Field. So it's pretty convenient.
Unbelievable. So you're living. I've never been to Wrigley, so forgive me for being just totally checked out. But I believe Wrigley's in pretty much downtown Chicago. Is that correct?
Actually, it's not. It's on the north side of Chicago, and Chicago is a big city full of smaller neighborhoods. Yep. So it's a very suburban-like feel within the city. Tree-lined streets, kids playing outside. Like in the summertime, my family and I will ride our bikes to the night games. So I have like my 7-year-old daughter trekking on a bicycle to park it up in my office and just walk down to the game.
That is just. I mean, so few kids will have that identical experience. I mean, yes, other kids are probably biking to the game, but not putting their bikes up in the office. Super cool. So the facility has not been there as long as Wrigley, but I'm assuming your time with the facility came before your time with the Cubs. Can you sort of give us the timeline? When did Elite come to be, and when did it end up at that specific location? And I'm curious when you bought that house or moved into that house and started making that left and right commute out of your driveway.
Yeah, we started Elite 12 years ago, and it coincided with my wife getting pregnant with our firstborn. She's a big firm attorney downtown Chicago. And I was working for the White Sox at the time, and both of us would get home at 11 o'clock at night, and kind of a later dinner and late to bed, and then get up the next day and do it again. But that wasn't going to work when you have children. One of us is going to have to be at home at some point. So I started with about 9 months of advance notice. It's like, okay, I'm going to build this business plan, business model, consulted some marketing people and other people that had done startups, and really put together a 9-month timetable of starting Elite, and that was 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And you've been in that same location in that neighborhood since then, or have you moved around?
We've been in the same neighborhood. We started off it was just one employee. It was me to start.
Yeah.
My best hire was my first hire. It wasn't a baseball guy. It was an operations person and more business strategy. And that he's still with me today. He's our COO. And he was actually my intern for the White Sox, and I brought him over as our first employee for Elite. But we started in a 7-cage model. Took about 3 years to grow out of that. We went to the facility that I'm currently located, and it's just about 3 blocks away from our old one. It was 13 cages. In 2 years, we outgrew that, and we doubled the size of our floor plan, and we now are at a 26-cage facility. We just basically knocked out a wall and doubled the size of our facility like 4 years ago.
You mentioned something in there, and you highlighted it as the most important hire you've made, and I can't stress the number of times I've seen guys who are running travel teams who have a, call it a GM or whatever you want to label the person, or a facility that has a head person that is not a baseball person that is the MVP. And
yeah, it's critical to the lifeblood of your business. I'll say this, no knock to your listeners that are baseball people out there. Baseball people are the absolute worst at following up on things that require a computer screen, just the day-to-day admin tasks. And it can be as simple as responding to an email or returning a phone call. Like, I joke that we've been successful as a business because we're really good at returning emails and answering phone calls.
It's like so obvious and so simple, yet for some reason it's not easy. It's hard.
Yeah. I think baseball people like doing baseball. The other side of it is just as important, if not more important, to the sustainability of your business. You have to keep books. You have to have like an organized quarterly business operation and plan and see it through.
Incredible. I actually am visualizing right now in my head 2 of the best GMs in the game, and both happen to be 2 of the most alpha females I know, and one of them is Jeff Schaefer's GM and right-hand woman, and one of them is Bob Reichman's right-hand woman. And it's just like they make it go. And pretty sure none have played in the big leagues. You know what I mean? It's like so many people want to like pound their chest because they hired this guy. He's doing lessons. He was in the big leagues. And you're like, yeah, that is cool. Like, awesome. But also, are the bills getting paid on time? Are you growing revenue? You know what I mean? Are you doing the things that make a business go? Because you need to make the business go in order to like have that impact on kids. If the business closes down, you're not going to have the impact on those families, those children. So that's super. So 12 years ago, you fire up, you've doubled in size, you double in size again, you move down the street to this facility. Remind me how many cages are you up to at this place?
26.
26 cages. That's no small place. On top of that, you're running teams. So you've got both sides. You got the facility sides. I'm guessing, you got the standard rentals, you've got the lessons, you've probably got the camps, and then you got the team side who are all out there, doing the travel ball thing. Here's a question for you. If you could pick just one of those and you had to spend the next year and the Cubs said, hey man, take a leave of absence, go do this thing, which do you do? Are you going to go jump in there and do lessons all day, every day, or are you going to go do travel ball every day?
Yeah, they're very different, right?
Yeah.
I think the travel ball, because you get to what you don't get from the lesson scenario is see the finished product and the satisfaction of players succeeding and watching that happen live on a field. That's, if you're really grinding out the time and doing lessons, you're probably not seeing many games. So the fulfillment of seeing players reach their potential, go on and do great things in the game, whether it be, high school varsity team succeeding or a kid getting a college scholarship, like those are things that you draw connections with people for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I can't tell you how many times that, those old stories of your players coming back. A lot of our former players work for us now too. Like those are just relationships that are built through hard work and cooperation. And those are some of the strongest relationships you have.
So we don't normally get somebody from the front office of a Major League Baseball organization. So let's spend a few minutes talking about that, just because we can. What are you doing with the Cubs? How long have you been doing it? And where do you see it? Where do you see it going in the next 6, 12, 18 months?
Well, I'm in my 6th year with the Cubs. The first 2 were as the biomechanics consultant at a time where, player development has now become the great frontier of where you get a competitive advantage. And the Cubs were wanting to get in front of that by, utilizing the new technologies that were out there and available. And that's kind of been my forte and what my background is in human kinetics. So I did that for 2 years and then basically wrote my own job description as the first director of hitting in Major League Baseball. I had some teams that were coming to me in the summer of 2019 and saying, would you be interested in being on our big league staff? And again, I have 2 small children at home. Like, no, that travel demand is going to be too much for me. But here's this idea that I have. It's kind of a bridge that crosses a lot of departments in terms of player development, scouting, player acquisition, sports science. And I kind of dip my toe in all of those areas with this job. But the day-to-day responsibility, the main one, is to oversee the entire offensive infrastructure, hire the coaches, train the coaches on the philosophy that we have, and then make sure that these player plans that we write are being executed. So, it took a couple of years to build the system to where I kind of envisioned it. But now that it's running on all cylinders, it's more or less managing people, manage your staff, make adjustments along the way, and, to execute the vision we have of the Cubs farm system and develop that into hopefully a soon-to-be world championship again.
I'm so naive that I am surprised that every organization didn't already have a position that was called director of hitting.
Yeah, I think there's still only a half a dozen that do. There may be 6 teams that have. I think there's more directors of pitching out there, but I'm not. My first year I was in uniform because I kind of had to be boots on the ground and really integrate myself to make the system to what I envisioned it to be. But now, it is a front office chair, and I'm wearing khakis every day and a polo shirt. But not as exciting. I do miss flipping a ball, but I think the strong suit of any leader is being able to delegate, and I'm really fortunate both at Elite and with the Cubs. I have the best staffs in baseball. And
that's a perfect segue, but before we segue, I do such a poor job at pointing people to where they can catch up with you. It'll definitely be in the show notes at playingschool.com/stone. But if you're listening now and you want to just hit pause and go to the websites, it's elitebaseballtraining.com, elitebaseballtraining.com. And you can catch up with Justin over on Twitter at elite_baseball, at elite_baseball. Which I got to say, that's a pretty elite, no pun intended, Twitter handle. That's solid.
Yeah,
that's solid stuff there.
In front of that right at the beginning, and I used to pump out a ton of content on Twitter, and the Cubs have kind of put the kibosh on that again, trying to keep a competitive advantage. We're doing in house, but at some point I won't be working in pro baseball, and I do look forward to pumping out the content again. But we do have a lot of content on our elitebaseball.tv site.
And that can be found straight off of the website that I read off before. There's tons of links and tons of free content, as well as obviously, paid content as well. I want to return to the delegation that you just mentioned, how as a leader, how important delegation is. Before we hit record, you were talking about how obviously the Cubs position is your main focus today, but also you happen to be the owner of a facility with, I think you said 26 cages and an organization that has 25 plus teams in it. So obviously delegation is important over there. Can you talk about how you prepped yourself and prepped your staff for, you have essentially become a off-hands owner. So I know there's somebody listening right now who maybe they're not ready for that today, but they're like, hey, in 5 years, that would be awesome. So can you give a little bit of insight how you were able to make that transition?
Yeah, I'll say it wasn't an easy one. I think back to when I first started the business. It's your baby. It's like your brainchild. If it's going to fail, it's going to fail because of me. I'm going to screw this thing up.
Yeah.
So what that meant was I tried to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And once and just through the travel team itself, the travel teams, those two were my responsibility. I recruited the first few teams. I coached the first few teams. In our first 3 years, we had 3 teams, and all 3 of them went to the Perfect Game WWBA Final Four. So, we had really, really strong teams. Sidebar here, that the thing about those initial teams, and that was what I considered the marketing of our brand. I wanted the teams to be good. I wanted to get national recognition right away, which we did because the teams were successful. I didn't strive to make money on those teams because the marketing dollars that you're getting by being strong were going to far outweigh the compensation you get by people paying gross amounts for travel team baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very, very positive thing that, looking back, that kind of put us on the map that we were fortunate to do. But getting back to the original question, when I was trying to do everything, the business wasn't growing. Once I hired more people on a full-time role and took the financial hit initially, the business grew exponentially. And it's because you need people to hire good people, for one, pay them well, and then my job is to put all of our employees, both with the Cubs and Elite, on the right seats on the bus for them to accentuate their talents, so what they're good at. So I'm not setting people up for failure by asking them to do something that maybe they're just not capable of that time. You want to try to grow them and help them in that area, but you want people to get the job satisfaction of kicking that job's ass by doing what they do really well. And that gives them more motivation, more satisfaction. You're not breathing over their shoulder, and they do a good job for you. And that's kind of the philosophy that I've taken in both places of my employment is hire really good people, put them in a position to have success, and celebrate those successes along the way, and give them some feeling of autonomy within a system, and you're going to get the most out of your people. That was really hard for me initially because I wanted to do everything. And then I figured out after stepping away, oh, my God. In fact, in the last 2 years with me being away from Elite, they've grown much more. I'm like, Jesus, you guys just needed to get me out of the way.
Isn't that crazy?
So you can run with some of these ideas that maybe I was hamstringing because I wanted to be involved in every decision that was being made.
It's so counterintuitive, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But also doesn't
now.
It doesn't. It's not possible when you're the one man show, right? Like you have.
It's not. Nor sustainable.
You have to bring people under the umbrella to grow, and that just builds upon itself. And I'm sorry, I cut you off. I think you just said you have 60 employees now.
60, 8 of which are full time.
Okay,
but yeah,
you beat me to the next question. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Eight full timers and a whole ton of guys. I can just imagine. I mean, I've been in a million facilities. You got local guys, whether they're high school coaches or travel coaches, or they work a regular job doing whatever their 9 to 5 is, and they're popping in because they love the game, and they're coming and doing whether it's 1 lesson a week or 20 lessons a week, and those are your part timers that are the other 52 guys.
That's right. Yeah, it's and some of them are teams coaches, some of them are doing lessons and classes. And then we have a slew of really good interns that come in each summer too, usually from the college ranks. And a lot of those people are looking to utilize our biomechanics lab and learn the new technologies, and that springboards them into professional jobs. So as we've lost employees to professional baseball, we tend to backfill with really, really good quality employees because of the foundation's been laid ahead of them and the opportunities that can grow out of it.
This show is called Travel Ball Talk, but I feel like today we're getting a little bit of more insight into the facility, which I love. I find it to be really interesting. And so most facilities aren't going to have their own bio lab, but for the sake of these guys, who are tuned in right now and they're trying to grow, they hear this idea of interns, they're like, "Whoa, what's that about?" Can you talk about how are you utilizing these guys, and because you talk about handing over and delegating to a full-grown adult who's like pretty good at what they do is one thing, but handing over some info and delegating to a kid, man, that's tough. So can you like forget the biolab part of it for a second and just like give some advice on some best practices for bringing an intern in for the summer or maybe a winter session or something like that?
Yeah, a lot of them will reach out to us. So we're kind of fortunate in that regard, because I think people know that we have a pipeline to pro ball and they want to utilize the new technologies that maybe a lot of other places can't afford, and I can't afford them either. I get most of the technologies free because I've consulted on several projects of tech companies that are trying to integrate into baseball due to I have a master's degree in human kinetics, and I think a lot of these companies don't know that where to look in the baseball community, and my name got thrown out there, and then like every company started coming to me for that thing. So it allowed us to put together a really nice biomechanics lab without the price. But these interns are trying to usually set themselves up for a future job. I've had people that have applied to the Cubs and lack experience, but may have a data science background or some type of human performance background. It's like, man, with just a little bit of tutelage, you may not get hired by the Cubs, but you're going to get hired by somebody. Why don't you come in our building and spend a year with us or spend a summer with us? And I think this is going to set you up for what you're looking to do. So I do have some advantages, I'll say, in getting those interns because of my dual employment. But those interns that we've had they're just grinding in that facility. Like, I used to do my office work out of there about 9 o'clock in the morning when it was quiet, and there'd be interns in there already researching things on our force plate computer, and sometimes they'd be, 10 o'clock at night, they're still in there. It's like, my God, do you guys ever sleep? But if you have young, hungry people, man, it's amazing how much further ahead this younger group in their 20s is compared to where I was in my 20s, just the ability to have so much more information at your fingertips.
And how do you recommend, okay, so kid from the local college calls up the facility and says, "Hey, I want to come intern. I don't know what I want to do." How do you fight the urge to just say, "Listen, man, just go pick up the balls in cage 7"? Like, how do you find the thing that's going to be of value to you as a business, but also of value to that kid, but also trust the kid that he's not going to screw something up?
Yeah, it's steering them in a direction. So they're coming in with the idea of growing in some tech or maybe biomechanics or data field. So it's steering them in a direction to do a research project. And we don't have the time. I don't have the individual time to do all these research projects I used to do. So it's like me learning from them too. Like, you steer them in a direction, they're putting in the hours. We've learned some really good things from 20-year-olds that had only been in our building for a couple months. So, again, it goes back to if you have interesting applicants that are really smart and you give them the opportunity and they just kind of steer the project along the way, they're going to produce some really good material. That's
pretty interesting, because I just see this world where some kid, maybe he has to check a box or something for some class, and he's like, "I need an intern," and it could literally become, 6 weeks of just picking up the cage, and what a waste of opportunity for both the business, the facility, as well as that kid. So if you're going to bring them in, have some, have an idea where you want to steer them. I want to transition and talk a little bit about travel baseball. Before we hit record, I was telling you I've had some guys from your neck of the woods, Nelson Gord with the Indians, RJ Fergus with the Hitters. I had Sarna on. I've a handful of these Chicago and Midwest guys on the show in the past, and the vibe I get was always one of blue collar, hard working, jump in a 15-passenger van, drive 18 hours to Atlanta, show up unshowered, unslept. We're going to throw our cleats on and go play baseball. And mom and dad are just going to stay at home because they're going to work. Like, tell me about your guys, and does it sound similar to what I described? Are those guys weirdos, or is this like a normal thing out of the Chicago area?
Yeah, I think Chicago is a melting pot of a ton of different socioeconomic backgrounds. We're located in an urban environment, which is where most of our client base is. From just the U side, we have like 3 leagues within 2 square miles of our building that house close to 5,000 youth baseball players just within 2 square miles of our building. So we are for the people that are coming into the shop every day, we're in a pretty high socioeconomic area, on the north side of Chicago. But we draw players from all over the suburbs, from as far north as the Wisconsin border, as far south as the south suburbs. So you'll get, which is why I love our teams, is you get all different types of backgrounds in one of our teams, from parents are professional doctors and lawyers that closer to our facility to the ones that are working blue-collar jobs out in the suburbs, and it makes for a really interesting team dynamic for sure.
That's nice. That's pretty cool. Are you, with your new role with the Cubs, are you getting the opportunity to do some of those events like you described, before when you had your 3 teams all get to the Final Four? Are you getting to go down and do any of those things anymore, or are you totally
I don't go
removed?
To the out-of-town tournaments, but I do have an 11-year-old daughter that is playing on the fast pitch side of our business. So I specifically started the fast pitch side about 5 years ago, knowing that I was likely going to have a daughter or two that was interested in softball. So selfishly, I was like, well, I should probably start off the fast pitch side of this too. So my oldest plays fast pitch for Elite. She absolutely loves it. She probably knows more about minor league and major league baseball than any 11-year-old girl on the planet. For example, I took her to the Field of Dreams game this past year, and she was hanging out in the dugout before the game and looks up on the scoreboard, and they're like getting the scoreboard ready for that night's game, and they were flashing across the Reds players. She goes, "Dad, how am I supposed to know who's good on this team? They don't show OPS on the scoreboard." I'm like, oh my God, I've created a monster.
All right, so this is
so I do, to answer your question, I do get to see our teams play because they're often in the same tournaments that my daughter is playing in.
Yeah.
And being the director of hitting, that was one of the keys to me stepping into pro ball again, was making my own schedule. So when I do go out to the affiliates, I travel Tuesday to Friday, and then I'm back home for my daughter's games on the weekend, and I don't miss them.
All right, so I did remember that I'd seen a link for Elite softball training down at the bottom of your Elite baseball training page. So this is kind of a geeky nerd question, but why do you separate the websites into 2 websites instead of just like one Elite training where you have baseball and softball in one spot?
Yeah, we actually have a bunch of different sites that all feed into the main page. So you can navigate it that way and
Gotcha.
Get to the TV links, get to our teams. We have a teams page specifically. And then the main training page is more steered towards camps, lessons, et cetera.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I see I'm looking at the Elite fast pitch training, which is, it's kind of the mirror image of the Elite baseball training. I'll tell you, I've asked.
Basically, when I bought the URL, I bought up every URL with. I probably own 20 of them at this point that had Elite, because I didn't know 12 years ago.
Yeah.
How this was going to end up spinning, so I just bought every URL.
Elite something training. Elite, yeah, got it. I've asked this before on the show. It's like, why don't we see more baseball facilities with not only softball, but with basketball or soccer or lacrosse? Like, I get that we as baseball people love baseball, but once you have the back office infrastructure that knows how to run a youth sports organization, it seems like more seems like more people would want to add softball at a minimum. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I do know one thing as being a father of a girl interested in sports. Dads will spend anything on their daughters.
Yeah,
so,
another reason to add it to your business, right?
No doubt. I pay for my own daughter, which is also weird.
You pay your own business.
Employees get profit sharing, so I pay for my own daughter to take lessons. And I grew up in a household that was extremely demanding in sports. People are probably calling the Division of Child and Family Services if I parented the way my parents parented me in sports.
Man.
So I'm really hands off with my own daughter. There'll be a time when I coach her when she gets older, but right now I don't want her coming to me to solve every athletic issue.
Yeah.
I want her to solve them on her own. And so I expose her to a lot of the different coaches. And there was a time where Jed Hoyer, our president for the Cubs, and my daughter, our kids were taking lessons at the exact same time. We're like, we don't want to coach them. And it was funny that we'd be talking about, Cubs front office stuff while our kids were taking lessons next to each other. So
bonkers. I know you've got a game to prep for, so I'm gonna sort of work towards wrapping up with you here. But I send over a handful of sort of prepped questions. I want to hit two of them. The first one,
sure.
The first one's just a quick hitter here. Something I'm gonna put the ball on the tee for you. Is there a book or movie, a website that you recommend to either other players or coaches?
Yeah, I looked at that question. I'm sorry to give you a terrible answer here, but books that I read that I find very interesting usually tend to be more academic, like research-based. So it's probably really boring for your listeners.
Yeah, but that's why I was specific about things that you're going to recommend, because I knew you're not going to recommend a textbook to, some 15-year-old. I don't think. Are you?
No.
Okay, good.
No, but for your coaches, one of the things that people ask, like, how do I get a job in pro ball? Or, you have to be very well-rounded.
Yeah.
Today's coach, you have to wear a lot of hats. But one of the things I do recommend is, pick up a Physiology 101 textbook and really understand it and learn it. For the fact that when it comes down to pitching and hitting mechanics, you're just talking about basic foundational human movement, and you need to understand how those systems work and feed off of each other. So that is very important to me. If you're going to be a mechanical coach at some point, you need to understand the body.
I dig that answer.
My favorite coaching movie, not book, because I don't read this is how you coach. I think you get that from experience and learning along the way by screwing up. I think that's where your most powerful lessons are learned. But I love Miracle. I love the way that Herb Brooks took this team of ragtags and got them to believe and really tricked them into building his style, building his team, his system, while the players themselves didn't understand at the time, but looking back, they were fully aware of what was happening at the time. Yeah. That's probably my favorite coaching movie or book.
So good. And you'll be arrested if you coach that way today.
Absolutely. That's kind of where I was going with my the way my parents coached me when I was young.
Yeah. All right. And then final question that can sometimes open up a Pandora's box, depending on your thoughts here. But what's one change that could be made to travel baseball that would have the biggest positive impact?
Team practice time at least twice a week. We play a ton of games, and games are important. But to reinforce what's happening on the field, you need to get into a teaching, learning situation in practice. Mm-hmm. And I think there's so many teams that they consider practice, well, we're going to open up the facility and just let you hit in the cage. That's not it, man. That's important. You need to work on your hitting, pitching mechanics. But getting them to learn the X's and O's on the field of where they need to be in backing up bases and doing cuts and relays and situations. To be able to do that a couple times a week, to me, allows you to grow more than just the skill set you're learning by the game.
And I'll put you on the spot. Is Elite practicing twice a week?
We aren't. We're doing it once.
Okay.
All right. Hey. Even getting the field space to do that, it is difficult. But I think the way they have it organized now is they're doing one team practice a week, and then they also come in the facility.
Well, and one of the things that you have as an advantage is, I'm assuming, most of your guys are pretty close in. Obviously, Chicago's such a densely
our
populated
oldest
area.
teams, which are, those are the college prep teams, your 16 and 17-year-old, they're coming from all over Chicagoland and in Illinois, sometimes even out of state.
Yeah, but mostly they're close enough where practice is actually possible. You see some of these clubs
our teams are still close to the facility.
Yeah, you see some clubs and you have 13 different states on one roster. You're like, yeah, they're not practicing, obviously. Which is, hey, it's different. It's maybe not good or bad. It's just different. And
it's really difficult to get practice space in the city. We are excited. I didn't mention this to you, but we are opening up a 7-cage facility in the suburbs July 1st. So we're really excited about expanding our footprint and being able to do more things with more space, which you get in the suburbs versus in the city. So we're adding a facility in Aurora starting July 1st. As I mentioned, it'll be 7 additional cages.
Actually,
house more teams.
I was going to ask you that. If I click on, I was clicking through the website while we were talking, and I clicked on, I think, classes and then youth, and it said select your location, and it gives me an option.
Yeah, we work out of several suburban facilities that we're just leasing space. So this one will be dedicated to just elite only.
Which is a great. You know what? We've had guests in the past who maybe don't own or have their own location, and man, they go here, rent the space, either all of it or a portion of it. Then they go to a different location. They go to a different location, and I'll tell you, it's kind of a good model.
It really is. You want to, in a small margin business, which baseball and softball instruction is a small margin business, you want to try to eliminate as many fixed costs as you can.
I tell you what, that last sentence might be the most important sentence of the entire podcast. If you're running the facility or even running the team, because it's easy to spend, and you go hungry if you do that. Let me ask you, and then we'll finish up. Do you have any sort of parting shots, last words of wisdom for any coaches or moms and dads or players who might still be tuned in right now?
Yeah, I think the travel baseball model has been given a lot of negative connotations over the years because being just something for facilities to stay afloat. And we're on the cheaper end of the spectrum because it's more important for us to truly develop the player. And that'd be my recommendation to parents that are out there. Like, it's not about the shiny uniform. Kids think that's cool, but it's like, where are you going to go that your player's actually going to get better? Where are they invested in the human, not just invested in the check that's cashing? And that is the part of travel baseball that's given it a negative connotation, because you do remember and hear all the horror stories of people embezzling money and people, just giving bad experiences to kids that turn them away from baseball and softball. But the ones that are tried and tested typically are pretty good, and they're good for a reason. Like, they treat people the right way. So it doesn't take much research to find that on your own. And just because one person isn't batting third and playing shortstop and wants to go off and start their own team because of that, is the way to go. Like, go where the people are invested in your child.
Love that. Justin, I appreciate you coming on. I want you to hang on 1 second longer. Sure. I'm gonna stop the recording, but man, this was great. More facility oriented, but very interesting for me. And my office is almost as cool as your office, but there's no game in my backyard today.
Yeah, it's 60 and sunny today. That's about as good as we can get right now.
Go get them. All right, hang on one more second.